All right, guys, what's going on? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving, and the countdown to Christmas has officially begun. And for us XDefiant players over here, the countdown for Season 3 is something that I would consider officially starting, even though a lot of us have been in the countdown already. Now that it's the last thing before Thanksgiving, it is something that's definitely worth being excited over. But that's not exactly what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're actually going to talk about something that's a little bit more of a rarity subject around here, because I'm a pub player. But as I've been kind of watching, well, I watched Call of Duty competitive a lot over the years. Recently, I haven't. Although as far as recently is concerned, I've been kind of off and on been paying attention to the Halo competitive side of things. And it's really exciting to see what the rosters are going to be when it comes to Halo Infinite and in probably its final year of competitive for that game before the next game comes out, et cetera, unless they announce one more year sometime after the next, world champs or whatnot. But anyway, and jokingly so, whenever I think of competitive COD, I can't help but think about that one time when Doom Clan played against 4 pros in a game of Hardpoint and a game of Capture the Flag, and the score ended up being 250-12 for Hardpoint. It was on Black Ops 2 and it was on Yemen, and then in Raid it was 6-0 on Capture the Flag. And both of those were recorded, obviously, and all that kind of stuff. And this was back in the day when people thought that your I guess average or slightly above average pub players who stomp people in lobbies and put up like some of the best quote unquote scores in the world, or like the best players in the world. And a lot of people's eyes were humbly opened to the truth after that. You know what I mean? So, but anyway, now just before moving on to today's subject in terms of the meat and potatoes, I will say, though, that I do think that there are a few pub players out there that are kind of outliers. And if they were to actually like learn the call outs and, learn strategies and stuff like that, because they spend so much time playing the game and their aim is good and all that kind of stuff, it's like if they were to learn the competitive ropes in terms of the differences between pubs and competitive, because they are really completely different games when it comes to an arcade shooter, I would say that they would fare pretty well. Because usually back in the day, at least, what they used to do was if you were consistently like a person who would consistently stand out in pub lobbies game after game after game legitimately, without messing with anything, without reverse boosting, without doing anything sus, that would be like one of like the 10 different qualifications that you would need to at least potentially be someone that might want to look into getting into competitive. But again, being a pro player and actually making it to pro is like a whole other thing, and it's even changed from what it was back then to what it is now. So anyway, but let's go on here, because there was an interesting poll that I put up in my community tab a few days ago. And as of right now, as of this recording, there are 216 votes on it. And the question that I asked you guys was, which of these had the bigger negative impact on casual multiplayer shooters? Number 1 was competitive, which got 21% of the vote. The biggest chunk of the vote was from content creators, aka YouTubers or whatnot, at 66%. 4% believe that there was no negative impact, and 9% say that multiplayer shooters were never casual. Now, I just want to say, in terms of if I had to choose one of these things out of the bunch, in terms of which one I would personally vote, I personally think the ones that had the most kind of impact was actually the YouTubers. More than anything, the YouTubers, whether you were a gameplay channel that was doing best class setups, or, whether you were like a regular commentator that would just post, your best gameplays and of course do a commentary over that or whatnot. Like a lot of these people, like even before I started coming into the scene back in 2015, like we're talking pre-2015 here, a lot of these people actually have had an impact over everything. Now, did they mean to have a negative impact or anything like that? No, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, some of these guys were really chill, like Sandy Ravage, for instance. He's a really chill dude to this day, but you can't deny that the man is a good player, and he's had an impact on the game, and people would run into him in the lobbies and stuff like that. And he was doing streaming and stuff like that before it was even popular. You know what I mean? So same thing goes with guys like XCal and Blame Truth and a few of those guys or whatnot. But then of course you had all these other guys that showed up later on, and they took it to a whole other level, especially when it came to creating classes or creating, you know, guys like Doom Clan and all that kind of stuff. There's so many different organizations, or at least there were so many organizations out there. But going back to my poll over here, though, I want to say that actually there's some truth to all of this, because, well, when you look at multiplayer shooters, even since the days of even since the days of when I was playing Halo Combat Evolved, before Halo 2 came out online, and even during Halo 2 Online, like, I was always trying my best. And this was before I even became aware of the online scene. And as a matter of fact, the online scene on YouTube back then was hardly a thing at all. I didn't even watch YouTube for, you know, for like Halo or Call of Duty or anything like that up until 2012. I absolutely had no idea. And then once I did, I just got hooked. I was, you know, catching up on videos that were made years prior and stuff like that. I had no idea. And then once I did, it wasn't until sometime later once I did to where I started not only playing better, because I could see the point of view of these players that were clearly better than me. And I took it upon myself to actually implement what I've learned into my own gameplay. And then once I understood a few things, like it, for instance, you know, spawns actually, having a method to the madness, so to speak, to where you can actually predict spawns and how there's a methodology behind them. I thought it was all random previously, you know what I mean? Which obviously makes a big difference. And then ever since then, it's been like a complete change of the player that I've become. I would learn about sound. I would learn about, you know, positioning, weapon classes, and I went through the inconsistencies of changing up my classes and then getting used to those classes. Like for me, like whenever I used to use a stock, like when I first started using stock in Black Ops 2, or even the Stalker perk in Modern Warfare 3, in the beginning, it was something that I didn't even bother to use. But then once I used it, it took a little bit of time to get used to. But once I did, I never stopped, because it would help that much. And it would keep me from also getting shot. I would learn strafe shooting, proper technique with my thumbs and all that kind of stuff. Like all that stuff had accumulated over time. But the reason why I'm mentioning everything that I'm mentioning here in this video is because, is all this going to be good or bad for XDefiant in your opinion? Now, I will give my opinion. I will talk about it. But the reason why I'm also mentioning it is because ever since private matches in XDefiant had released, which has only been like, what, a week ago, if not less than that now, what's been happening is that players... the competitive scene is actually starting to form, and there's a few organizations out there that are actually creating these events for money prizes. Some of them are smaller money prizes, some of them are larger money prizes. You know, you've got other communities out there that are kind of doing their own thing, and then of course there's LAN events in specific areas of, you know, given state, to where people can actually show up and play, you know, legit competitive XDefiant. And some of these prizes are actually like, you know, they have like a $10,000 prize for first place or something like that, for last time I checked on Twitter or something like that. So the competitive scene is starting to form, and it's not going to be until year 2 until the actual, you know, where we're actually going to see who the pro players are, which I'm actually very interested in. Obviously, I think we're going to see some new faces, because XDefiant is a new game that's entered the neighborhood, so to speak, right? It is a new game around the block. It's been around for 6 months now. In about 6 months from now, we're going to see more people that are like going to be like, there's a lot of people already that are aspiring pros. And then there's people that are actually, I think, at some point in time, I think some pros that may play a different game might actually switch to XDefiant whenever the pro scene does hit. I wouldn't be surprised. I remember seeing a video to where a competitive Valorant player, I don't know if he was a pro or not, like actually just tried XDefiant and said, okay, this is different, but it's kind of fun. I kind of like it or whatnot. So again, they're completely different games, you know, because Valorant is Valorant. It's a tactical shooter, you know, and XDefiant is an arcade shooter. And speaking of which, with XDefiant, you know, it's an arcade shooter. So therefore, whenever the pro scene comes to full fruition, it's going to be a completely different game than what we play here in pubs. And what I mean by that is there's going to be things that are GA'd, also known as gentlemen's agreements. In other words, everybody agrees to not use such and such because it's not competitive, right? Because either because it's broken, or either because it gives too much randomness as opposed to something that you actually legitimately earned and stuff like that. There's you know, within arcade shooters, I mentioned previously in other videos, in arcade shooters, there's like a lot of cheesy stuff in there, right? And the reason is because arcade shooters at their core are actually games that are meant to be like, I'm sure it's a competitive multiplayer shooter, but it's meant to be a lot more lighthearted and a little bit more fun, and to where you could play like with all sorts of cheesy classes and get kills and stuff like that. But when you're talking about like a true competitive shooter, there's like, you know, if you're not using the meta, and if you're not using, you know, the competitive stuff, or not playing on the competitive maps, and, you know, the factions that are going to be GA'd, ones that you cannot use, you know, you're not going to be able to like mess around, you know, like you do in pubs. And obviously it's going to be probably a 4v4 instead of a 6v6. Again, it's like a completely different game when you play competitive versus what you play in pubs. And, you know, it may sound like little things, but trust me, when all those little things add up in terms of what you can and cannot use, maps that you can and cannot play on, weapons that you can and cannot use, maybe even attachments that you can and cannot use for said weapon, it really does change the game. It's almost like you're playing a completely different game. And this is exactly what is slowly but surely starting to come to fruition when it comes to XDefiant. Obviously, there's a few more things that have to be decided in terms of like what people can and cannot use. I don't know exactly, but I know that some of you that are in the that are on the community event list or whatnot, I'm pretty sure you guys know like what may or may not be banned, or what can potentially, you know, what you will and will not use and stuff like that. But I think for now, I think players are using like pretty much anything except for maybe a couple of things here and there. But it's really interesting to slowly but surely watch everything form. And if you go back to my poll over here that I mentioned a few minutes ago in this video, like overall, when it comes to competitive in the year 2024, do you believe that this is a good thing overall for XDefiant or a bad thing? Now, my opinion is that it is a good thing. And number one, one reason is because, well, competition is good. And like I just mentioned, like you're playing a completely different game when you're playing competitive. And on top of that, not everybody who plays XDefiant plays ranked. As a matter of fact, to my knowledge, the majority of people play pubs. So as long as there's always that difference, as long as there's always that option, I think overall, the more eyes are on this game, the better, you know. And it's kind of like people who enjoy, and again, I really hate it when I compare organized sports, physical sports to you know, video games or competitive gaming or whatnot, but it's the first thing that pops to mind, so I'll use it. You know, just because somebody's a fan of watching football or watching professional basketball, you know, doesn't necessarily mean that they want to play in the in the NFL or in the NBA or something like that, right? But they enjoy watching the game, you know, at its highest, you know, skill, like watching the best of the best out there play the game, because, well, at the same time, it not only is it fun to watch, but you never know, there might be something you might pick up on. And when it comes to video games, that's where the difference is. When it comes to video games, it's like, you know what, if you were to actually play as much as these people play and do what they do, like literally, if you were to actually spend that much time playing, right? And that much time going over strategy, that much time to learning the call outs, right? And all that stuff, and actually putting it into practice along with a few other players that you know that you would consistently be doing this with, you could potentially become, you know, a competitive player that works their way up the ranks and makes it into pro. Now, granted, that's very, very difficult because only the top 1%, literally, only the top 1% become pro players. This is not a made up statistic. It is very real. It is the top 1% of players in the world that actually legitimately become pro players. However, there are a ton of names out there that you've never heard of or never seen that are constantly trying to make it there. And another reason why in this day and age in organizations like COD or Halo, the reason why it's so hard is because, number one, it's expensive, right? So there aren't as many teams because it's, what did it cost? Like $25 million per team in order for them just to become a part of the Call of Duty official, you know, World League. And then, of course, you got Halo. I don't know how much the Halo World Championship thing in terms of competitive, the Pro League for Halo would cost for franchising or whatnot. But there's only like, I think, I don't know, like 16 teams per or whatnot. And the thing is, there's only so many spaces you can take. So in my eyes, there are other players that are out there that are of that caliber, but they just haven't made it yet because, again, things have changed since the days of 2012. And your average player, your average competitive player has certainly gotten better over the course of time. But at the same time, getting into the pro scene has gotten even, you know, harder because there's less spaces in order to take in, and again, like, it's become expensive, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know how XDefiant is exactly going to do it, but all I know is that you're going to start to see more players come out of the woodworks that are like really, really good that you've never even heard of before. And in my opinion, I think overall that's a good thing, to be honest with you. You know, and the thing is this, like, when you look at the poll, like, competitive has had an impact, yes. Even since back in the days, I remember even the pub players that you'd watch on YouTube would implement some of the things that the pros had implemented in their game from what they saw. Obviously, content creators, we've already gone over how content creators have had, have had an impact on everything. And then, of course, no negative impact because, again, the more eyes you have on the game, the better. So that makes sense. And then, of course, multiplayer shooters were never casual because even during the days of Halo 4, I'm sorry, not Halo 2, when online multiplayer game became a thing, I mean, even when you compare it to trash talking, when there was no muting the lobby mics, right? In Halo 2, you guys have any idea? For those of you guys that are younger, you probably don't. But for those of you guys that were around ever since Halo 2, you guys will know how much trash talking there would be in lobbies, right? Like seriously, like insane trash talking. And that's because there were a lot of passionate players even back then, but they weren't nearly as good. We didn't have the knowledge that we had today. We didn't have the amount of reps, put into multiplayer shooters on console that we have today. You know what I mean? So it's evolved over time. But if you think about it, the culture was always there ever since the beginning, but we just didn't know it. We didn't know it consciously. We knew it. It was subconscious, but it was like in the back of your mind when you think about it, but it wasn't like conscious. We didn't know. But, even for me, I always loved the thrill of getting in a gunfight in Halo, because that was the only option that we had back in 2024 in terms of console online multiplayer shooters. I loved the dopamine that I would get by getting into an engagement. And then obviously if I lost the gunfight, it would be, I'd get less dopamine, but I'd still get the thrill of it. So I'd get some. But if I won the gunfight, it would give me that much more dopamine, which is kind of what XDefiant does. It's one of the reasons why I use the M16 as much as I do. For some reason, that weapon gives me more dopamine than any other weapon in the game, any other weapon. And I played with a ton of weapons and I love all the other weapons. Don't get me wrong, the ones that I use anyway. But like, there's something about that M16 that I really, really like. I really love it. And I like it even more with the suppressor more than anything else. And obviously in pubs, the suppressor comes in handy. So, but with that being said, guys, I want to know, as I close here, I want to know, in your opinion, do you think that the upcoming XDefiant, competitive / pro scene that is slowly starting to form here ever since the release of private matches, do you think that it is overall good for XDefiant, or do you think that it is bad or negative in some sort of way? I want to know your opinions down below, so that way we can get this particular topic a little bit more insight in terms of your point of view, because I do know for a fact that there are those of you that are in the comment section of my videos that do play competitive games, whether it's an XDefiant or whether it's not an XDefiant. I'm not the only one with some knowledge about this. And again, the only, in terms of competitive, that I've only played was like Halo Ranked. That's it. So again, I've just been a person who watches, whenever there's a tournament going on with Halo, or whenever there's the World Championships for Halo. I don't watch competitive COD anymore, especially since most of the players that I'm familiar with have already retired. Plus the game itself, I just don't play it, so I just don't have an interest in it anymore. But as far as XDefiant goes, I'm going to be very interested to see in terms of who some of these players are, some of the things that they're able to do and all that kind of stuff. There's always more to learn, and it's always exciting to watch. So let me know everything in terms of your thoughts on today's topic. Be known in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.